So welcome everybody to this Rishi talk. I've been urged and requested a few times to give this talk as well on the Rishi Occult tradition. And for all of you who are familiar with me or have practiced with me, be it meditation, mindfulness, or the Chintamani, or if you come to any of my pujas or blessings or empowerments, I know you all may be a bit curious about what do I really do on the occult practice. So as many of you know, I work with the Rishis. In Thai, it's called Lersi, but in Malaysia and in Singapore, we transliterate them as Lersi. So for the sake of this talk, I'm just going to call it Rishi. That's the original Sanskrit name of what we call the Rishis. So I'll be sharing with you about this very beautiful tradition in itself, and about my encounters with it. So what I'm sharing in this is based on my experience and as much studies that I could do in regards to Rishi, because the Rishi tradition, the earliest it can trace back to is about 5,000 years. That's a pretty long time ago, right? And as we know that things get misinterpreted, some translations are lost, and sometimes, every kind of institution, be it religion or not, they do get corrupted. And then the essence and sometimes the deeper meanings of their teachings, they do disappear. So I'm very blessed that I got into the Rishi tradition through my monkhood. When I first got into monkhood and practiced meditation, and then I started having the Rishi coming to guide me, which I will share with you, based on my experience and on my research on what the Rishis are about. When I first worked with the Rishis, I asked them, how can I find out more about you through the scriptures? And my Rishi told me, it's you can't find, and some mantras and certain techniques that he taught me, he said, you will never ever find them on Google. You just can't find them. And he has proved he has proved himself right many times. So the Rishis is what we call the Saptarishi. So originally, the earliest source you can trace back, they are the 7 Rishis. And they are also called the Seers of the Vedas, which are the Vedas, the Vedic texts, which what modern day Hindus are studying about. So they practice in solitude, and I know this is a modern term on how they downloaded sacred hymns, and spiritual science. It's a very, I would say, intensive practice, because it's through their tapas and all, they intensify their practices and their meditation, and then they heighten their consciousness. They attain high levels of consciousness, and then they are able to receive all these messages and this wisdom from the universe. And in today, we know there's yoga, astrology, geomancy, divination, tantra, alchemy, herbology, necromancy, magic, and light working. I know light working is a very modern term because everyone's talking about light language, light working. But the Rishis are also known to be beings of light. They work for light. They are formless as we know them today. 5,000 years ago, they are not exactly formless. And that's how they are actually the origins of light working. And based on my experience, that's what I've been taught. Now it all has been passed down. So I'll just give you a brief history on the Rishis. It's a very wonderful tradition. So originally they are the Saptarishis or 7 Rishis. I won't go into details of the history and the names. You can look up on Wikipedia for that. Alright. Okay, let me just hide my face right here. Okay, sorry, my face is hiding. So they're also known, as I practice along, that the Rishis, they actually represent the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. Or in the Chinese, we call it the Beidou Qixing. It's similar. The 7 stars pointed down, but I'm actually blocking one of the stars. I do not know how to remove my face from the screen. But anyways, when you want to look for true north, you can always look up at the skies. Perhaps you're a sailor or you're a mountain trekker. You lost your compass. You're always taught how to look out for true north. And for those of you who are familiar with me on the pujas that I do, why do I always recommend that you get the 7-star light? And in Chinese, we call it the Qi Xing Ben, because they are symbolic for the Rishis as well. And when you do the puja on the 7 lamp, you light the 7 candles and you do the right puja, it can reduce, mitigate negative planetary influences and karmic effects. To be honest with you, I'm a practicing Buddhist. I used to be a monk for 5 years, studied a lot of texts, did a lot of meditations. Buddhism in itself, as we all know, is the teacher of karma and the most comprehensive teachings of karma that we have. If you pull up all the scriptures, even if it's just in the Theravadan text, you have a book that is thick, probably A4 size, and the words are very small. These are just the collected scriptures of karma. And the Buddha has mentioned that there's no one that's able to fully comprehend the effects and the intricacies of the workings of karma other than the Buddha himself, because he attained to that truth on his own. So there's no one, not even me, that's able to determine how does karma exactly works. It's all very limited. And when we do the 7-star puja, we are mitigating, the negative karmic influence by reducing it. There's no puja that can help you to cut off or to remove all negative karma. All right. So just be very clear on that, because energy can never be destroyed. It can be transformed. So when we work with the pujas, we are actually working with the energies, managing them, and then transforming them. So the Rishis, in most of the sources, are also said to be born from Brahma. In Hinduism, we call them the creator god in themselves. Let me get a glass of water. So because they practice and then they receive it, from the source or whatever we call it, the pujas, the mantras, the various signs, the various techniques, the various magic, is true deep meditation. So in fact, through my experience, is that if you want to develop any kind of abilities or deepen your spirituality, meditation in itself is important. And you don't sit there trying to receive something, because meditation is in action. It's about stilling your mind, being open, being receptive. But if you sit there, I know there are some meditation techniques that you have to create these, you have to create that. We are just pulling out a lot of cravings and our greed. We're not very sure of what is it that we really need. And it can become a form of spiritual materialism. Unlike the ancient times, or the traditional methods of meditation, it's really about understanding yourself first and foremost, before you can understand the bigger cosmic laws and how you're interconnected with it. Just putting out there. And in some other sources, the Rishis are also said to be manifested by Shiva. Later on, I will show you some pictures of the Rishis. They are usually in Thailand. They are seen as wearing tiger cloth skin, just like Shiva himself. And some of the Rishis have the third eye, like Shiva. And this is the interesting thing. The chant, there's a chant where you chant 108 names of Shiva. He actually manifested 108 Rishis. And of course, there's 7 of them that are related to the first 7 Rishis as well. We won't go into that. You can do as much research as you want. You can't find a lot of things that I'm going to share with you. Right. So Shiva manifests the first tier of 108 Rishis. I know that in Thailand these days there are a lot of people that practice being a Rishi. But to be honest, they are on the 4th or the 5th tier of the Rishis. That's why some so-called Rishis, or we call them Achan, they can create spells for black magic and attracting the opposite gender. It doesn't sound very spiritual at the end of the day. The Rishis do bless you in your worldly concerns to help you But if such a high being, like I mentioned, they went through intense meditation, do you think they would actually come and teach you how to have a spell to get attraction from the opposite gender? So unnecessarily, ethics are very, very important in developing psychic powers. But so you may have the question, if they came from the same source of Shiva or the first tier of 108 Rishis, how do they get corrupted along the line? My answer to your question is very simple: franchise. You can never fully control the quality of your franchise. Simple as that. So for the first tier of Rishi, for the first 108 under Shiva, each and every one of them will manifest another 108. And then another 108, another 108, another 108. And when I talk about Rishis, I'm really talking about non-human Rishis, the non-human ones that I'm working with. So, so I'll move on from that. So I'll just introduce some of the more prominent Rishis. There's one, Agastya. For all of, if you're familiar with the Nadi leaf astrology, whereby the astrologer has a set of leaves, and then the astrologer will flip through and look for your name and can identify your leaf, and can tell a lot of things about you. So one of the ancient Rishis is Agastya, and of course he's also a natural medicinal scientist. As I mentioned earlier on, the Rishis, they are cultivators, and they cultivate in order to help the world as well, to try to bring a form of enlightenment and to relieve the suffering of the world. So compassion is one thing that is very, very important, not just in the Rishi tradition, but in fact any spiritual tradition, in fact in life as well. Without compassion, we'll just be judging people, finding fault, and you know where that leads. Like right now with the COVID situation, compassion, you may think that it might not help the world, but if everyone practices compassion, I assure you that you will suffer less and experience life in a more meaningful and peaceful manner. So the other Rishi is about 2,500 years ago, the Rishi Jivaka. He was a top Ayurvedic practitioner during the Buddha's time. And very interestingly, he was also converted by the Buddha himself, and he became the personal physician of the Buddha, and he practiced the dharma. And he reached a certain stage of enlightenment himself as a layperson. So Rishis are all householders, most of them, and if you look at the first 7 Rishis, which I mentioned earlier on, they do have families as well. And very interesting thing about Jivaka, the Thais pray to him a lot. And his final test from his guru in herbology is for him to go around ancient India to look for one single plant that does not have any medicinal or healing properties. That was his test. And Jivaka, he could not find that one herb that does not have any medicinal or healing properties. And that's how he kind of graduated, like he has completed his studies. He managed to find a healing property for every single plant that he could find. It's a very beautiful tradition. And Jivaka in Thailand, the Thais like to shorten everything. They call Jivaka Chiwok, Prak Chiwok, or Lersi Chiwok. People pray to him for health, and which is what we need the most right now. And I do encounter some TCM practitioners, and I notice that they actually carry Jivaka. And sometimes you would oh, I don't really like to talk about this, but yeah, Jivaka is beside them, giving them insights and sometimes specific instructions on what to do. And coincidentally, these practitioners, these TCM practitioners, happen to be meditators as well. Doesn't matter what kind of meditation they follow, but it's the traditional ones, some kind of pranayama, tai chi, qigong, and even Buddhist meditation in themselves. And there's just sidetracking a bit. There's also a Chinese fairy or deity who is into medicine. He's called Hua Tuo. the one who healed the warlord Guan Yu. Yeah, you can look up more on that. So when I noticed, these are the two deities that I notice all the time when I go to a very, very good TCM practitioner. Either Hua Tuo is next to them, or Jivaka is next to them. And it's very amazing. Yeah, I kind of trust them more as well. Alright, so the Buddha is linked to Rishiism as well. So when the Buddha, he discovered, he saw the four sides. He saw an old person, a sick person, and a dying person. And then eventually he saw an ascetic, because during the Buddha's time in ancient India, there was already this spiritual tradition of going into the wilderness to practice in order to attain enlightenment. It has been, this spiritual culture has been there all along. So it allowed the Buddha, mainly the fourth side, when he saw an ascetic practicing, he decided to leave his princely life, the comforts of his home, to look for enlightenment. So in fact, all the Rishis since the past, we trace them back to 5,000 years, but in fact, they go beyond that much, much, much later, and much, much, much earlier. They've all been meditating, and some even trying out certain yogas, certain pranayamas, to try to attain enlightenment, which is to liberate themselves from suffering. So when the Buddha left home, first thing he did, was to go and look for a teacher. So he got to Alara Kalama first, who taught him to meditate into the sphere of nothingness. Which means that there's nothing. There's just absolute nothing in the meditation. But when the Buddha got out of his meditation, he realized that that's not the ultimate. No, there's still suffering. The moment he gets off his meditation cushion, everything comes back, right? And then he left. And Alara Kamara did say that the Buddha was the best student that he can take over the entire Sangha. But the Buddha said, no, I want to seek the truth. So the Buddha left and looked for a second teacher, Uddakaramaputra, who got him into the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. So likewise, Uddakaramaputra told the Buddha that was the ultimate attainment, and the Buddha did not gain enlightenment from there. He's like, no, this is not the path. Because during that time, in ancient India, they have this concept of self, Atman. And everyone is trying to practice to reach Atman, or to unify with Brahman or Atman, become one, or the big self, which in the modern day language we keep talking about the higher self a lot, to transcend, So a lot of them, of course, when you practice that kind of intensive meditation, you're bound to develop certain psychic abilities as well. And the Rishis are known to be ascetics and hermits as well. They practice. So the Buddha was practicing the Rishi path, because that was the path that was available during that time to be a Rishi. So Rishi is not just about magical spells. The focus here is on spiritual enlightenment, and the other magic and all. You can call them as bonuses that come, or you can. Simply put, when you open up yourself to consciousness, to your senses, you realize that there's just more things than what we learn in school, or what we can perceive the naked eye and the naked ears. But as you practice along, you don't find it like, oh wow, a big wonder. You just get used to it. Like I'm used to that kind of stuff as well. It's nothing special. But of course, when you first started, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's amazing. What's that? But that can very often pull us away from why we went for spirituality in the first place, to understand the meaning of life, to reduce suffering, to get more peaceful, to have more purpose, and to feel more connected, right? If you start talking about, oh, I could see your aura, you go around telling people, all I see is your chakra, your aura, I'm talking to spirits, then it doesn't seem like you're very connected to the human realm anymore. Might as well go and join the spirits, if you get what I mean. If you can't even communicate properly with a fellow human being, what's the point of your attainments? You can't help anyone. You can't save anyone. People will just look at you like, hey, stay away from me. You're weird. And as we know, great saints, they're not weird, or the Buddha is not weird. So this is wisdom. We have to balance what we learn. We need to be able to manage all the knowledges that we open up to, and to apply them to daily lives, and then we can bring about wisdom. So anyways, the Buddha, he obviously left his teachers and went to practice on his own, and then he found the middle way. He realized there's no self to attain. Buddha practiced asceticism, that he tried, because they believe that if he can let go of his body in some way or other, he will release his soul, to merge with Atman, or whatever you want to call it. But Buddha started asking himself, what if there's no self? What if there's no soul? Everything is compounded, and everything that's compounded is impermanent, and if I grasp onto them, I start to suffer. The Buddha awoken to this truth. That's why he was called the Buddha. No one taught him that path or that teaching. He awakened to it himself. And that's what we call a Buddha. Someone who has discovered the truth for himself without a teacher. Because like I mentioned, he left his teachers. So when the Buddha was practicing asceticism at first, after he left his teachers, he had 5 ascetics that came to learn from him. They eventually left him when the Buddha realized that severe austerity is not going to help. Because the Buddha practiced to the extent where I'll show you the previous clip, when he touches his belly, he can feel his spine, and when he touches his spine, he can feel his belly. And he only drank from like a drip of water that falls off from the blade of a leaf, or sometimes just eating 1 seed per day. Sometimes he holds his breath, and he almost died. He was standing by the river, he's practicing asceticism, sleeping on a bed of thorns and all that. For 6 years he almost died. That's when he realized he needs to find the middle path. Finding a middle path is not finding excuse that I want to be very relaxed. The Buddha said he heard it from a boat that was passing by. There was this old musical teacher that was teaching his students, saying that if you play the instrument, if the string is too tight, it will snap. That means if you're too rigid, you push yourself too hard, it will snap. But if it's too loose, it will not play. So you find the middle path. So of course, when he decided to practice on that way, his 5 first disciples, they left him. They thought that, Siddhartha has given up on the path. He has forsaken the path. We will leave him. But when the Buddha gained enlightenment, long story short, he went back to find the 5 disciples. They wanted to avoid him, but they noticed the radiance in his demeanor, and they felt that he must have attained something. And eventually the Buddha created the Sangha, the monks. So they had to shave their heads, shave their beards, and practice, and the Buddha laid out the practices for them. And this is a very interesting thing, a beautiful thing. When the Buddha first gained enlightenment, he did not go and look for the 5 former ascetics disciples. He wanted to look for his previous 2 teachers. But he detected that his previous 2 teachers, they have passed away, with the Buddha's divine eye. And he noticed that because they were meditating on the absorption, on the sphere of nothingness, and the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, they got reborn in that realm, whereby you can't communicate with that realm at all, because it's just nothingness, absorbed into nothingness for millions of years, or neither perception nor non-perception. The Buddha just can't teach them at all. So, yeah, that's but those are very high states of meditation in itself. We have to give virtue to them, but they do not bring about any form of enlightenment or liberation. So emptiness is not nothingness, but I'm not going to talk about emptiness today. Okay, so this is the important part. A lot of ascetics, during that time, they became the Buddha's disciples. Some of them, they are gurus in their own right, with a retinue of disciples. And this is the very beautiful thing about ancient India, on how people are so sincere about spirituality. They like to debate in the past. And there is a rule that if, let's say I debate with you, you know, I'm a master of something, and you are someone who do not have your lineages or anything, but I debate with you on spirituality, on the teachings or the concepts. And if I lose to you, what I will have to do immediately is to kneel down, bow to you, and call you master. Please accept me as a disciple. Why do they do that in the past? Because they were all very sincere truth seekers. They're seeking enlightenment. They're not there to prove that they're better than others. They're not there to debate out of ego or to gain more disciples, gain more students. In modern day, who does that anymore? You know, they're just debating to hurt each other, boost their ego, you know, cling onto the status or fixed views, and we don't convert. You know, we're not, how true are we? And I think it's a beautiful thing to tap into the origins of spirituality. This is how people practice. These are their attitudes, that they just want to devote their entire life to truth, not to speak up for my dogma versus your dogma. If I lose you, accept me as a disciple, and you always get accepted after that. You know, and if I lose to you, all my students are going to come to you and bow down to you and call you master, because we are seekers of truth. That's the very beautiful thing. All right. So the Buddha was known to teach not just human beings but heavenly beings as well, or we call them, some of you like to call them angels or devas, it doesn't matter, or deities or gods, right? The Sanskrit and Pali term for it is deva. And the humans that he converted, some of them are rishis in themselves. You know, they converted. They are seeking for truth. And there are some rishis that are non-human beings that were converted not converted, they became the Buddha's disciple as well, to practice towards enlightenment. And that's why the rishis that I work with, at first I was thinking like I asked the rishi, aren't you Hindu? Why do you ask me to practice the Buddha's teaching? Why do you always tell me the Buddha is the so-called the highest, although there's no real hierarchy? But why do we think that the Buddha is the most noble? Like you said, well, you can't find in the scriptures, but if you think deep enough, the Buddha said that he taught gods and men, and what kind of men during the time, you know, when the Buddha was alive, a lot of them were rishis, you know, and they take faith in the Buddha, right? So as I practiced along with the Rishi, there was one day I was very curious, because the Rishi guides me all the time. He gives me sacred mantras, he teach me certain kind of I wouldn't say healing abilities, but he's always guiding me. And so I asked him, I said, he even gave me dharma teachings on emptiness, which I got a shock, because in Thailand the rishis are all about spells and magic. I was like, but why this particular rishi, whom I know is not, he doesn't speak in Thai slang but more Vedic slang, why do you teach me the dharma? Why do you teach me about meditation? You know, why do you not help me to focus on developing psychic powers as well? Right. So one day I asked him, I said, are you enlightened? You know, since you can guide me so much, you tell me where to go, which teachers to seek after. And then, because I'm Chinese, and my family, one of my family members practices the Rishi as well. That's another story in itself. And he speaks in Mandarin at first, and then we call him Fa Shi, which means Dharma teacher. So when I kept Fa, Dharma, it means law. It can mean Fa Li, which is psychic powers, magic powers as well. So one day when I asked him, are you enlightened? His reply was, do you remember that I always said Fa Shi or Rishi is not a man, it's not a Buddha, it's not a spirit, it's not a ghost, and it's not a god, not an animal. I've been telling all of you this for the past 2 to 3 years. You still didn't get it at all? I was like, I look at him, I was like, I don't know. You know, he throws this kind of test all the time. And then he said, what do you call me in Chinese? The first word that I told you to call, Fa. He said, yes, stop it right there. Dharma. I am just a manifestation of the Dharma. I was like, oh, wow. And it started to make sense to me. You know, so the Rishis, he himself told me that they are non-religious, that in every region where spirituality exists, the Rishi will manifest in a form to guide the practitioners. And if monks and nuns were to practice in the wilderness, the Rishis will go there to teach them, because they probably need some kind of survival skills, be it physical survival skills, like herbology, or sometimes there are spirit disturbances in the wilderness as well. So the Rishis have to teach them how to practice. When I talk about Rishi, I'm really talking about the first tier of the 108 that comes under Shiva. That's the Rishi that I work with as well. So Rishi is always very interesting. He doesn't come in, sometimes he likes to joke a lot. The Rishi that I work with, he likes to talk about philosophy. If you have a consultation with him, it's going to take more than 1 hour, because he's going to give so much teachings to make sure you understand, like a very grandfatherly very patient, to explain things to you, to make sure you understand, and how you can improve your life, how you can improve your spiritual understanding. And when I work with the Rishis, I noticed that he can invoke any higher devas or any dharma protectors that you want, And so number one is because they've been practicing for thousands of years, and they are compassionate beings. They are kind of very high level beings. So someone who can let's think about it, pause for a while. Someone who can reach that high state of attainment, like I mentioned, you need to have a lot of loving kindness, you need to have a lot of compassion. And you will notice that people who are very compassionate and very kind-hearted, they tend to make friends. They're well liked by everyone. And these are the teachings of the Buddha as well. But we do not need spiritual teachings to teach us that. We learn that in school. If you're always grouchy, pessimistic, negative, cynical, no one wants. I wouldn't even want to spend more than 5 minutes with you, as compassionate as I want to be, because there's no conversation, right? But someone who is open, who has mutual respect, who is kind, who is gentle, who is ethical, will definitely make a lot of friends. So it's not like a big owl when I learned that the Rishis can invoke the very powerful gods, the higher beings. Like he's always say, "Oh, this is my good friend. That's my good friend." Who you want to talk to? Okay, that's my good friend. I'll ask him over. I have good relationships with all the beings. I also have good relationship with the lower beings. That's what he tells me. Makes sense. He's not bragging. Compassion. Someone who is very compassionate, like take Mother Teresa, for example. Just very open. You may not have met her, but when you think of Mother Teresa, it's like, oh wow, that's a saint. Right? So this is something to keep in mind. And why the Rishi tradition is, these teachings are very important as well. If you want to develop yourself, not just in life, not just in spirituality, but in the occult as well. What I noticed is that, of course, when I first started off, I don't like to talk about what I developed. But let's just put it this way. I developed things, skills, all right? I was so amazed by it. I was caught up in it for years as well. And the Rishi always said, the more you crave for it, the more the power will not come. But the more you purify and cultivate your mind, the more it comes. And that's, from my experience, I will tell you that's true. You don't crave for it. You don't go and try to open your third eye. Honestly, I'm asking you, if you're watching this, you're not blind. Why do you need a third eye? You have two eyes that are working fine, right? How often do you use the two eyes to look at beautiful things in your life? To notice the beauty around you, the beauty in the other person? Perhaps you did a lot. And if you did a lot, why do you need a third one? And if all you see are problems and suffering in the world because of the way your mind is programmed, wouldn't a third eye just give you more problems to gossip, to have rumors? Come on, I'm a very practical person. My teachers, be it the human gurus or the Rishis, the non-human gurus, they are very practical as well. Why do you need a third eye? You can't trust these two. Do you think you can handle the third one? But when you don't crave for it, it comes, I assure you. And the third eye is the eye of wisdom. Not for you to see things, to rape people. I like to use the word rape. People who tend to open a bit of the the gross level of third eye that can see a bit of stuff in you, but you ask them to look up, somewhere, like in a realm that they don't even know it exists. They wouldn't even know, right? They just want to look at the human realm. I see you. I see. To me, that is rape. That's spiritual rape, psychic rape. Before, like in therapy and in coaching, you don't just go and point out and do you have this, do you have that to your clients. You bring out questions, you open the dialogue, you prompt, and you open up space for your client to open up, to share. Then you guide them at their pace. But people who use this gross level of third eye, just like raping everyone, like, I see this, I see that. To me, that's not very ethical. You always need consent. Even for my students, I don't go and like scan them and check on them unnecessarily. You always give space. So keep that in mind. Okay, so then the Rishis told me about the slides. The Rishi told me that I will find him in every region. So in 2012, I was going to Dharamsala, and then the Rishi said to me that you're gonna find me in India. I was like, of course, India, Shiva. Why can't I find you? Right. So I went to Dharamsala for 2 months. Outside of my retreat, when I was studying Tibetan Buddhism, I was trying to look for a Shiva temple, a Hindu temple. And it was so difficult to find because Dharamsala is where the Tibetan refugees are living in. They're mostly Buddhists. I couldn't find. And then I began to doubt, I really doubted, like, you said that I will find you if I go downhill, but I can't find you. Like, I started to really doubt. I'm someone who is very skeptical, unless it's part of my intellectual mind. So when I finally gave up looking for him, I went downhill, I took a cab, and I got to this town called Beer. And then someone told me like, hey, there's going to be like a big puja in one of the Tibetan palaces by a great Rinpoche. Go check it out, I've already given up my search to find the Rishi because I was looking for Shiva. That's when I got to the palace. The first thing I saw was this statue right there staring at me. And I got the shock of my life. It was like, oh wow. I didn't know what he was. After that, then I realized that this saint of Tibet was Tangtang Gyalpo. He's a Mahasiddhi from Tibet, which Mahasiddhi, someone who has attained great spiritual or psychic powers just like the Rishis. He's an enlightened master. He's a Vajra master. Rishis are good with all this occult art, esoteric art as well. And he built iron bridges, his practice of compassion. He built a lot of iron bridges around Tibet for people to cross. This is a real person. And he's a patron of operas and Tibetan operas and dance. And he also wrote Avalokiteshvara, which is Kuan-Yin Sadhana. And Kuan-Yin is a practice that it's one of my main practices. So it just made a lot of sense. When I saw the image, I saw that this Rishi, Tangtang Gyalpo has a third eye, he has a beard and just wearing like that. I was like, oh man. I was like, wow, Rishi, like you're right, I've been trying to look for you in the form of Shiva, but you just appeared like right there. So like he was right.